What's up, y'all? My name is Ray. If you're here for the first time, welcome. And to my returning viewers, I am humbled to welcome you back for another video. Guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. It's awesome. You'll make my day. So today I want to show you a couple of really bad takes from Ben Shapiro from two of his videos on the tragic killing of Tyre Nichols and use them as a general framework for a quick little discussion about systemic racism and policing. So first things first, let's take a minute and make sure we're all on the same page with the basic facts of what happened to Tyre Nichols, as we're going to need that for some context. I'll paraphrase now from Wikipedia. Tyre DeAndre Nichols was a 29-year-old black man and father to a 4-year-old son. He worked for FedEx, was an amateur photographer, and loved skateboarding. On January 7th, 2023, 5 police officers from the Memphis Police Department severely beat Tyre Nichols during a traffic stop, causing him to be hospitalized in critical condition, where he died 3 days later. The officers claimed to have stopped Nichols for reckless driving. They then pulled him from his car, pepper sprayed him, and tased him. At one point, Nichols was able to break free and make a run for it, and when the officers caught up to him, they punched, kicked, and hit him with a baton multiple times, even after he was restrained. The 5 officers, all black men, were arrested and charged with murder, kidnapping, assault, and misconduct. 3 firefighters, 2 emergency medical technicians, and a lieutenant who attended the scene were relieved of duty and subsequently fired for failing to conduct an adequate patient assessment of Nichols. 2 other police officers have also since been relieved of duty. Memphis Police Chief Sarah Lynn Davis called it a basic failing of humanity, and on a personal note, having watched the footage of the killing, it is one of the more disturbing things I've seen in recent years. Okay, now that we're on the same page, let's listen to Ben Shapiro's bad take on the officers being arrested and his overall opinion of the situation.
They were all arrested, and they were all black. And the victim in this particular case was also black. This does not stop the left from claiming that white supremacy is to blame, because white supremacy is the ghost in the machine. It is responsible for literally everything in life. Just as to the feminist movement, everything in the world is the patriarchy. To the left, when it comes to race, every single thing is white supremacy, even if it is black police officers who are beating and effectively killing a black man. That is still white supremacy. One of the worst things about politics is that single factor analysis tends to be the most easily available way of approaching politics, and it's also the worst way.
First of all, wow, that is some serious projection. So the guy for whom literally everything from the footwear of cartoon candies to the word of the day on Sesame Street amounts to an attack on straight white masculinity, that guy is going to complain that we are using single factor analysis. The shameless audacity of these people just continues to astound me. Secondly, obviously, no one on the left thinks that literally everything in life is the result of white supremacy. What Ben is dismissively alluding to there is the fact that the criminal justice system and law enforcement in particular are systemically racist, and thus the officers, as tools of those institutions, behaved discriminatorily toward Tyre Nichols on account of his race. I know this is a complicated idea for conservatives to follow, but life is complicated, so they're gonna have to get over it. Racism and discrimination have been foundational elements of our criminal justice system since the very beginning, and are well documented at the highest levels of these institutions. Law enforcement policies in this country have specifically targeted and oppressed minorities, most especially African Americans, for centuries. And dehumanizing stereotypes and fear-mongering have created an environment in which state violence against black people is largely ignored. You saw this with the cruelty and malice of the attacking officers and the indifference of the first responders. To them, Tyre Nichols was just another black criminal toward whom violence and dehumanization are all too common practice. Consider this: black people are only 13% of the population, yet they accounted for a staggering 27% of people fatally shot by police in 2021, meaning that they were twice as likely as white people to be shot and killed by police. That is what white supremacy looks like at the systemic level. It manifests in the way that black people are treated, not in the individual race of every pair of boots on the ground. Like, I am confident that in the exact same situation, I, as a white man, do not get beaten to death on that street corner. I could run from the police and resist just the same, and I'm going to get roughed up and arrested, sure. But there is almost no chance in my mind that I am beaten to a pulp and left to bleed out in front of a dozen onlooking first responders. You see this same kind of theme with regard to healthcare discrimination in this country, where the pains and maladies of black people are not treated with the same care and concern as those of white patients. At the end of the day, I'll be viewed as a human being by the officers and first responders, which is a level of respect Tyre Nichols was not afforded. And as much as I hate having to give these disclaimers every time I try to make a point, I feel compelled by the nonstop whataboutisms of modern political discourse to state that no, of course I'm not suggesting horrible things don't happen to white people. You know, the criminal justice system is a mess from top to bottom, and white people, particularly poor and middle class white people, are often the victims of its backward and anachronistic methods as well. And by virtue of being the majority population, this happens with disturbing frequency. All right, now that we've established that systemic racism in law enforcement isn't going to strictly manifest through white male police officers, let's move on to Ben Shapiro's next absurdly misguided take. First, we're going to listen to a proposed policy adjustment from Professor Alexis Hogue Forger of Brooklyn Law School. Then we'll pause to consider our thoughts before listening to and comparing with Ben Shapiro's take.
My really strong sentiment is that to decrease violence between law enforcement officials and the public is to decrease the contact and intervention that police have with the public.
Fewer traffic stops.
Exactly. They don't need to be, police do not need to administer stops in basic traffic violations.
Okay, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Too often we see traffic stops for minor infractions turn into unnecessary violent encounters with law enforcement. With traffic cams and other non confrontational methods at our disposal to flag and ticket drivers for minor infractions, yeah, let's let police focus on things like major crimes, on the root causes of criminality, on working with communities to make them safer instead of chasing down every single minor infraction with batons and guns drawn. I definitely agree with the professor on that. But I wonder what Ben Shapiro had to say. What do you think?
Professor Alexis Hogue Forger of the Brooklyn School of Law. She said, maybe a solution here is that police don't actually need to administer stops in basic traffic violations. No, they do. They actually do. In fact, one of the reasons why the Scorpion unit existed in Memphis is because they were pulling people over for reckless driving. The reason they were pulling people over for reckless driving is apparently there was a high correlation between reckless driving and other criminal activity. It's very much akin to James Q. Wilson's broken windows theory in New York City, which became the way that New York brought down its crime rate in the 1990s. The basic idea was turnstile jumpers very often are people who also commit other crimes. I'm confused as to why you believe that if basic traffic stops are not done, suddenly the crime rate will go down. And so the solution from this Ivy League professor at Brooklyn Law School, it's an ivory tower person, is that what if the police just don't police anymore?
Well, we're not exactly surprised, are we? You know, it's amazing how he can cram so much wrongness into so few words so quickly. First of all, there's no evidence or even a statement from the police department that suggests Tyre Nichols was pulled over for anything other than being black. Reckless driving appears to have been used merely as an excuse for a pretextual traffic stop. Basically, he was pulled over for no reason, beaten and murdered by the state, murdered by the government of his people and by agents sworn to protect and serve his community. Secondly, the broken windows theory is a largely debunked law enforcement framework from the 1980s, and it did not lead to New York City's drop in crime. But it is super racist, so of course Ben Shapiro loves it, right? And thirdly, pretending to argue with some straw man who is suggesting that we simply have no law enforcement whatsoever is so dumb you would only ever see it on right-wing media. What about fewer traffic stops for minor infractions sounds like no more policing to you? Listen to this. A 5-year analysis from the New York Times concluded, quote, police officers pulling over cars had killed more than 400 motorists who were neither wielding a gun or knife nor under pursuit for a violent crime. That's a rate of more than 1 per week. Traffic stops in this country turn deadly at a rate of more than 1,000 per year. And these pretextual traffic stops, pulling people over for minor infractions just as a pretext to try to search them without a warrant, disproportionately target black people. Listen to this. A 14-year study from the University of South Carolina concluded that black drivers are 63% more likely to be pulled over than their white counterparts, and 115% more likely to be searched during that stop, even though the data showed that white drivers were more likely to be carrying contraband like illegal guns or drugs. A Stanford University study of more than 95 million traffic stops concluded, quote, police stops and search decisions suffer from persistent racial bias, unquote. So, of course, Ben Shapiro is a huge fan, right? Look, we all agree that law enforcement is necessary. It's so obvious, I feel stupid even having to say it. What people like myself and Professor Hogue Forger would like to see happen is for police departments to refocus their efforts from the kind of minor traffic violations that lead to so much violence and waste so much police power to the kind of policing that actually makes our communities safer. Many police departments around the country have been testing and implementing these types of policy changes for years, and the results so far have been extremely promising. That is the direction we need to be going in. And the tragic killing of Tyre Nichols is yet another depressing example of that fact. And that's where I'm going to wrap things up for today, y'all. If you've stuck with me this long, I really appreciate it. If you liked this content and want to see more, please leave a like on the video. Say hi in the comments, leave me some feedback and suggestions. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. You'll make my day. Thanks again for coming. I hope I see you guys again soon. Peace out.